Hi, everybody. My name is Jason.
I'm Caden.
I'm Jade.
I'm Eli.
And we are the Yahuwah and the Torah group. We are on YouTube, we're on Odyssey, we're on Rumble. You guys will find us everywhere. Kind of like a bad penny. We just keep popping up. So here we are. And we are on the third section of the introduction. This is part 3 of the story of the writings of Flavius Josephus. And this is the complete works of Josephus. Now, gentlemen, this book has been fairly long already, and we're only in this 11 pages. Now, fellas, can you guys give me a recap of exactly... Actually, we're in this 19 pages. Can you guys give me a quick recap of where we're at? Anything that has happened to this point, because there's a tremendous amount of stuff here, and we ended at 32. So, tell me, gentlemen, is it 32 we start at, Mr. Cole?
Yes.
We do? Okay, so we're starting at 32. Gentlemen, tell me what's the scoop. Anything? Can you guys remember anything at all?
So we have Flavius Josephus. We get to go through his later life now. We get to like his middle-aged life where he is sort of as priest, sort of this kind of like war leader where he can guide people, he can like put people to war, instruct people not to go to war. And we get to hear about how he escaped several encounters with death, how many people went to betray him, and he went to basically escape, and he was able to use the power of Yah to get out of there and disappear from there. How he was able to escape the Romans, how he was able to escape his own people, and how to be able to save people, and why corn was so expensive.
Yeah, why corn was very expensive. Yeah, always raiding the corn. Now, Jay, do you have anything more on that? Can you lead us? What do you...
People that were supposed to be working with him, they ended up trying to kill him and send like assassins after him. And he escapes a lot. And
what would you say his role is? Is he a president? Is he like a governor?
He's like a mayor or something. I don't know. He's
a mayor. But he has an army. Do mayors have armies?
I don't know, maybe.
Sometimes.
The police force, maybe? That
Maybe. Okay, all right, so let's continue on, guys. And if you guys are interested, the parts 1 and 2 will be linked in the description below. I wouldn't start on part 3 unless you've actually listened to parts 1 and 2. So let us continue on. 32. But as for the inhabitants of the city of Tiberias, they wrote to the king and desired him to send them forces sufficient to be a guard to their country, for that they were desirous to come over to him. This was what they wrote to him. But when I came to them, they desired me to build their walls, as I had promised them to do. For they had heard that the walls of Taraki were already built. I agreed to their proposal accordingly, and when I had made preparation for the entire building, I gave order to the architects to go to work. But on the third day, when I was gone to Taraki, which was 30 furlongs distance from Tiberias, it so fell out that some Roman horsemen were discovered on their march, not far from the city, which made it to be supposed that the forces were come from the king, upon which they had shouted, and lifted up their voices in condemnations of the king, and in reproaches against me. Hereupon one came running to me, and told me what their dispositions were, and that they had resolved to revolt from me. Upon hearing which news, I was very much alarmed, for I had already sent away my armed men from Tarachi to my own home, because the next day was our Shabbat, for I would not have the people of Tarachi disturbed on that day by a multitude of soldiers. And indeed, whenever I sojourned at that city, I never took any particular care for a guard about my own body, because I had had frequent instances of its fidelity its inhabitants bore to me. I had now about me no more than 7 armed men, besides some friends, and was doubtful what to do. For to send to recall my own forces I did not think proper, because the present day was almost over, and had those forces been with me, I could not take up arms on the next day, because our laws forbade us to do so, even though our necessity should be very great. And if I should permit the people of Tarachi and the strangers with them to guard the city, I saw that they would not be sufficient for that purpose, and I perceived that I should be obliged to delay my assistance a great while. For I thought with myself that the forces that came from the king would prevent me, and that I should be driven out of the city. I considered, therefore, how to get clear of these forces by a stratagem. So I immediately placed those, my friends in Tarachi, on whom I could best confide at the gates, to watch those very carefully who went out at those gates. I also called to me, where am I at? I also called to me the heads of the families, and bade every one of them to seize upon a ship. Okay, now, actually, let me finish that part. Seize upon a ship to go on board with it, and to take a master with them and follow him to the city of Tiberias. Now, this is what the translator's notes are, and as you can see in this, some of the OCR looks a little funky, because it came up with like skulls and crossbones and things. This is what it says. In this section, as well as 18 and 33, those small vessels that sail on the Sea of Galilee are called by Josephus and Ploia and Scapia plainly ships, so that we do not wonder at our evangelists who still call them ships, nor ought we to render them boats as some do. Their number was in all 230, as we learn from an author elsewhere. Jewish War 2.21.8. So I guess that is important for some reason on this. Okay, so what's happening right here?
Basically, his people, he thinks, are like turned against him. He thinks the king is like going against him and trying to get him out of the city.
Okay, and so what is he trying to do here?
He's trying to build walls. He was trying to do, like, he promised some walls and people, so he was like trying to build them walls like he did for another city.
Okay, and
so
when
he went to another place, and I think he saw the walls were knocked down. I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, and so what is he doing right now? Why is he doing the ships? What is all his friends doing exactly?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. So here we go. I also went on board one of those ships with my friends, with the 7 armed men already mentioned, and sailed for Tiberias. But now, when the people of Tiberias perceived that there were no forces come from the king, and yet saw the whole lake full of ships, they were in fear what would become of their city, and were greatly terrified, as supposing that the ships were full of men on board. So they then changed their minds, and threw down their weapons, and met me with their wives and children, and made acclamations to me with great commendations. For they imagined that I did not know their former inclinations to have been against me. So they persuaded me to spare the city. But when I was come near enough, I gave order to the masters of the ships to cast anchor a good way off the land, that the people of Tiberias might not perceive that the ships had no men on board. But I went nearer to the people in one of the ships, and rebuked them for their folly, and that they were so fickle as, without any just occasion in the world, to revolt from their fidelity to me. However, I assured them that I would entirely forgive them for the time to come, if they would send 10 of the ringleaders of the multitude to me. And when they complied readily with the proposal and sent me the men aforementioned, I put them on board a ship and sent them to Tarichi and ordered them to be kept in prison. All right, so what ruse did he just do? What exactly did he do?
He basically faked the number of his people. He basically brought out a whole bunch of ships, big ones, like army loads of ships, and basically went out to these people and they're like, "Oh, please don't hurt us. We understand that." They thought they were about to have to go to war, but the people were scared of this, and he said to like the one other guy on the ship with him, he was like, "I just put the anchors down on the ships a while off so they don't see it," and they were like, "Well, we're sorry." He's like, "That's okay. I'll offer you. Just give me the 10 leaders, the 10 top people that were sitting there running this against me."
Yeah.
And he basically put them off in prison.
Okay, 34. And by this stratagem, it was that I gradually got all the Senate of Tiberias into my power, and sent them to the city forementioned, with many of the principal men among the populace, and those not fewer in number than the other. But when the multitude saw this, with what great miseries they had brought themselves, they desired me to punish the author of this sedition. His name was Cletus, a young man, bold and rash in his undertakings. Now, since I thought it not agreeable to piety to put one of my own people to death, and yet found it necessary to punish him, I ordered Levi, one of my own guards, to go to him and cut off one of Cletus's hands. But as he that was ordered to do this was afraid to go out of the ship alone among so great a multitude, I was not willing that the timorousness of the soldiers should appear to the people of Tiberias. So I called to Cletus himself, and said to him, "Since thou deservest to lose both thine hands for thy ingratitude to me, be thou an own executioner, lest if thou refusest so to be, thou undergo a worse punishment." And when he earnestly begged of me to spare him one of his hands, it was with difficulty that I granted it. So in order to prevent the loss of both hands, he willingly took his sword and cut off his own left hand, and put an end to the sedition. All right, let's talk again a little bit about Josephus's ways of doing business here.
He likes to cut people's hands off, I think.
He likes cutting people's hands off, but he also does things quite, you could either call it cleverly or deceitfully or something of the sort, where he is able to, I guess this would be if anyone had a master's in psychology, this is what you call psychology. And there's a thing called reverse psychology, and reverse psychology is the ability to have people do things they wouldn't normally do simply by words like this. And so what was his reverse psychology here?
Basically, like this dude, like cut both of his hand and make him stop.
Yeah, that was the thing. He said, okay, because first he wanted to cut off one of his hands, but he couldn't make it, right? So then he says, by his own power, look, you're going to lose both your hands. And the guy's like, well, let's negotiate with this. Let's just keep one of my hands. So Josephus got exactly what he was after, and nothing more. 174. Now the men of Tiberias, after I was gone to Terce, perceived what stratagem I had used against them, and they admired how I put an end to their foolish sedition without shedding of blood. But now when I had sent for some of those multitudes of the people of Tiberias out of prison, among whom were Justus and his father Pistus, I made them to sup with me. And during our supper time I said to them that I knew the power of the Romans was superior to all others, but did not say so publicly because of the robbers. So I advised them to do as I did, and to wait for a proper opportunity, and not to be uneasy at my being their commander, for that they could not expect to have another who would use the like moderation that I had done. I also put Justus in mind how the Galileans had cut off his brother's hands before I ever came to Jerusalem upon an accusation laid against him, as if he had been a rogue and had forged some letters, as also how the people of Gamala, in a sedition they raised against the Babylonians after the departure of Philip, slew Charis, who was a kinsman of Philip, and withal how they had wisely punished Jesus, his brother Justus's sister's husband, with death. All right, so these guys killed Jesus, Justus's sister's husband, with death. Okay, when I said this to them during supper time, I in the morning ordered Justus and all the rest that were in prison to be loosed out of it and sent away. But before this, it happened that Philip, the son of Josephus, went out of the citadel of Gamala upon the following occasion. When Philip had informed that Varus was put out of his government by King Agrippa, and that Aquilius Modius, a man that was an old friend and companion, was come to succeed him, he wrote to him and related what turns of fortunes he had had, and desired him to forward the letters he had sent to the king and queen. Now when Modius had received these letters, he was exceedingly glad, and sent the letters to the king and queen, who were then about Berytus. But when King Agrippa knew that the story about Philip was false, for it had been given out that the Jews had begun a war with the Romans, and that this Philip had been their commander in that war, he sent some horsemen to conduct Philip to him. And when he was come, he saluted him very obligingly, and showed him to the Roman commanders, and told him that this was the man of whom the report had gone about, as if he had revolted from the Romans. He also bid him to take some horsemen with him, and to go quickly to the citadel of Gamala, and to bring out hence all his domestics, and to restore the Babylonians to Batanea again. He also gave it to him in charge to take all possible care that none of his subjects should be guilty of making any innovation. Accordingly, upon the directions from the king, he made haste to do what he was commanded. Now there was one Joseph, the son of a female physician, who excited a great many young men to join with him. He also insolently addressed himself to the principal persons of Gamala, and persuaded them to revolt from the king, and to take up arms, and gave them hopes that they should, by his means, recover their liberty. And some they forced into the service. And those that would not acquiesce in what they had resolved on, they slew. They also slew Charis, and with him Jesus, one of his kinsmen, and a brother of Justus of Tiberias, as we have already said. Those of Gamala also wrote to me, desiring me to send them an armed force, and workmen to raise up the walls of their city. Nor did I reject either of their requests. The region of the Gaulinetes did also revolt from the king, as far as the village of Solimia. I also built a wall about Seleucia and Sogani, which are villages naturally of very great strength. Moreover, I, in like manner, walled several villages in Upper Galilee, though they were very rocky of themselves. Their names are Jamnia and Meroth and Archaber. I also fortified in the Lower Galilee the cities of Terce, Tiberias, Sepphoris, and the villages, the cave of Arbela, Barasobi, Selaman, Jothapa, Karachireko, it's a hard one, Sego, and Jaffa, and Mount Tabor. And then the translator's notes say, part of these fortifications on Mount Tabor may be those still remaining, of which were likely lately by Mr. Mondere, see his travels. I don't know anything about that. I also laid up a great quantity of corn in these places, and arms withal, that might be for security afterward. But the hatred that John, the son of Levi, bore to me grew now more violent, while he could not bear my prosperity with patience. So he proposed to himself by all means possible to make away with me, and build the walls of Gishchala, which was the place of his nativity. He then sent his brother Simon and Jonathan, the son of Sisina, and about 100 armed men to Jerusalem, to Simon, the son of Gamaliel. This Gamaliel may be very likely the same that is mentioned by the rabbis in the Mishnah, in Jukism and in Porta Moses, as is observed in the Latin notes. He might be also that Gamaliel II, whose grandfather was Gamaliel the first, who is mentioned in Acts 5:34, and at whose feet St. Paul was brought up, Acts 23:3. Okay, you guys remember this guy, Gamaliel, the one that Paul, you guys, New Testament, anyone?
I don't remember the names.
This was the dude. This was the Gamaliel was the guy that Shaul studied under. He was that was the Pharisee leader of Shaul. That's the guy. He was a huge Pharisee in those days, and so
So this dude might have actually been around the days of Paul.
this is the second, because they were talking about this. Gamaliel may be the very same that is mentioned by the rabbis in the Mishnah in Judaism, as is observed in the Latin notes. He might also be that Gamaliel the second, whose grandfather was Gamaliel the first, who was mentioned in Acts. So I think this is like the son of this guy. That's what it is.
So that means Paul and his son might be the same age, maybe?
Probably. The son of Gamaliel, in order to persuade him to induce the commonalty of Jerusalem to take from me the government over the Galileans and to give their suffrages for conferring that authority upon him. This Simon was of the city of Jerusalem and of a very noble family of the sect of the Pharisees, which are supposed to excel others in the accurate knowledge of the laws of their country. He was a man of great wisdom and reason, and capable of restoring public affairs by his prudence, which they were in an ill posture. He was also an old friend and companion of John, but at that time he had a difference with me. When therefore he had received such an exhortation, he pursued the high priest Ananias and Jesus the son of Gamaliel and some others of the same seditious faction to cut me down. Now I was growing so great, and not to overlook me while I was aggrandizing myself to the height of glory. And he said that it would be for the advantage of the Galileans if I were deprived of my government there. Ananias also and his friends desired them to make no delay about the matter, lest I should get the knowledge of what was doing too soon, and should come and make an assault upon the city with a great army. This was the counsel of Simon. But Ananias, the high priest, demonstrated to them that this was not an easy thing to be done, because many of the high priests and of the rulers of the people bore witness that I had acted like an excellent general, and that it was the work of ill men to accuse one against whom they had nothing to say. All right, anyone know what's going on? Anyone? These are just a tremendous amount of historical things.
So
is anyone still awake?
Yeah, I am. This dude is a friend of John's, and he's not on its side with
We have I think if we knew history a little bit better, I think these would be like, oh, okay, but we don't know history.
He's grown to great power now. He's just ruling over giant cities at this point.
Okay, 39. When Simon heard Ananias say this, he desired that the messengers would seal the thing, and not let it come among many, for that he would take care to have Josephus removed out of Galilee very quickly. So he called for John's brother Simon, and charged him that they should send presents to Ananias and his friends, for as he said, they might probably by that means persuade them to change their minds. And indeed, Simon at length thus compassed what he aimed at, for Ananias and those with him, being corrupted by bribes, agreed to expel me out of Galilee without making the rest of the citizens acquainted with what they were doing. Accordingly, they resolved to send men of distinction as to their families, and of distinction as to their learning also. Two of these were of the populace, Jonathan and Ananias, by sect Pharisees, while the third, Josar, was of the stock of the priests, and a Pharisee also. And Simon, the last of them, was the youngest of the high priests. Now, the translator note says this Jonathan is also taken notice in the Latin notes as the same that is mentioned by the rabbis Porta Moses. I don't know who the rabbis are. I don't listen to the rabbis either. All right, where are we at? 198, right? These had it given them in charge that when they were come to the multitude of the Galileans, they should ask them what was the reason of their love to me. And if they said that it was because I was born in Jerusalem, that they should reply that they four were all born at the same place. And if they should say it was because I was well versed in their law, they should reply that neither were they unacquainted with the practice of their country. But if, besides these, they should say they loved me because I was a priest, they should reply that two of these were priests also. Now, when they had given Jonathan's companions these instructions, they gave them 40,000 drachma out of the public money. But when they heard that there was a certain Galilean that then sojourned at Jerusalem, whose name was Jesus, who had about him a band of 600 armed men, they sent for him and gave him 3 months' pay and gave him orders to follow Jonathan and his companions and be obedient to them. They also gave money to 300 men that were citizens of Jerusalem to maintain them all, and ordered them to also to follow the ambassadors. And when they had complied and were gotten ready for the march, Jonathan and his companions went out with them, having along with them John's brother and 100 armed men. The charge that was given them by those that sent them was this, that if I would voluntarily lay down my arms, they should send me alive to the city of Jerusalem. But that, in case I opposed them, they should kill me and fear nothing, for that it was their command for them to do so. They also wrote to John to make all ready for fighting me, and gave orders to the inhabitants of Sepphoris and Gabara and Tiberias to send auxiliaries to John. Now, as my father wrote me an account of this, for Jesus, the son of Gamaliel, who was present in that council, a friend and companion of mine, told him of it. Okay, there's a lot of Jesuses. There's a lot of dudes named Jesus. And we know that if it was Greek, it might have been Jesus, but if it was Hebrew, it would have been Yahushua. So
there's a lot of Yahushuas. It's a pretty,
probably
Yeshua and Yahushua are pretty popular.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I was very much troubled as discovering thereby that my fellow citizens proved so ungrateful to me as out of envy to give order that I should be slain. My father earnestly pressed me also in his letter to come to him, for that he longed to see his son before he died. I informed my friends of these things, and that in 3 days' time I should leave the country and to home. Upon hearing this, they were all very sorry, and desired me with tears in their eyes not to leave them to be destroyed, for they thought they should be if I were deprived of the command over them. But as I did not grant their request, but was taking care of my own safety, the Galileans, out of their dread of the consequences of my departure, that they should then be at the mercy of the robbers, sent messengers over all Galilee and to inform them of my resolution to leave them. Whereupon, as soon as they heard it, they got together in great numbers from all parts, with their wives and children, and this they did, as it appeared to me, not more out of their affection to me than out of their fear on their own account. For while I stayed with them, they supposed that they should suffer no harm. So they all came into the great plain wherein I lived, the name which was Asocus. Okay, anyone want to break this one down? Eli, you understand this?
Kind of.
So Josephus wanted to, his father wrote to him and said, I'm dying, I want to see my son before he dies. And he said, all right, I'm on my way. So he told his people, like, look, I got to go see my dad before he dies. I'll leave in 3 days. And they're like, no, they start freaking out, like, please, if you leave, we're all going to get killed. Everyone's going to come kill us. The robber will get us. War will break out. And they all, like, gathered around him, all the city gathered around him, basically to say, don't leave. And he's like, you guys are only scared for yourselves. You guys don't actually care about me.
So, but he had another set of dudes, people that were after him trying to kill him. So the people that told him to stay, I don't think are the exact same people that are trying to kill him. Right? Does that catch it right?
Yeah.
I guess, Jade, you with me on this at all? Yeah. Okay. Continue on. But wonderful it was, what a dream I saw that very night. For when I had betaken myself to my bed, as grieved and disturbed at the news that had been written to me, it seemed to me that a certain person stood by me and said, O Josephus, leave off to afflict thy soul and put away all fear. For what now grieves thee will render thee very considerable and in all respects most happy. For thou shalt get over not only these difficulties, but many others with great success. Okay, and then the translators notes say, this I take to be the first of Josephus' remarkable or divine dreams, which were predictive of the great things that afterwards came to pass, of which see more in the notes on antiquities. Okay, let's continue on. 2:10. When I had seen this dream, I got up with an intention of going down to the plain. Now, when the whole multitude of the Galileans, among whom were the women and children, saw me, they threw themselves down upon their faces and with tears in their eyes besought me not to leave them exposed to their enemies, nor to go away and permit their country to be injured by them. But when I did not comply with their entreaties, they compelled me to take an oath that I would stay with them. They also cast abundance of reproaches upon the people of Jerusalem that they would not let their country enjoy peace. When I had heard this and saw what sorrow the people were in, I was moved with compassion to them, and thought it became me to undergo the most manifest hazards for the sake of so great a multitude. So I let them know I would stay with them. And when I had given order that 5,000 of them should come to me armed, and with provisions for their maintenance, I sent the rest away to their own homes. And when the 5,000 were come, I took them, together with 3,000 of the soldiers that were with me before, and 80 horsemen, and marched to the village of Chabolo, situated in the confines of Ptolemais, and there kept my forces together, pretending to get ready to fight with Placidius, who was come with 2 cohorts of footmen and 1 troop of horsemen, and was sent thither by Cestus Gallus to burn those villages of Galilee that were near Ptolemais. Upon whose casting up a bank before the city of Ptolemais, I also pitched my camp at about a distance of 60 furlongs from the village. And now we frequently brought out our forces as if we would fight, but proceeded no further than skirmishes at a distance. For when Placidus perceived that I was earnest to come to a battle, he was afraid and avoided it. Yet he did not remove from the neighborhood of Ptolemais. About this time it was that Jonathan and his fellow legates came. They were sent, as we have already said, by Simon and Ananus, the high priest. And Jonathan contrived how he might catch me by treachery, for he durst not make any attempt upon me openly. So he wrote me the following epistle. Jonathan and those that are with him are sent by the people of Jerusalem to Josephus, send greeting. We are sent by principal men of Jerusalem, who have heard that John of Gischala had laid many snares for thee, to rebuke him and to exhort him to be subject to thee afterward. We are also desirous to consult with thee about our common concerns and what is fit to be done. We therefore desire thee to come to us quickly and to bring us only a few men with thee, for this village will not contain a great number of soldiers. Thus it was that they wrote, as expecting one of these two things, either that I should come without armed men, and then they should have me wholly in their power, or if I came with a great number, they should judge me to be a public enemy. Now it was a horseman who brought the letter, a man at other times bold, and one that had served in the army under the king. It was the second hour of the night that he came, when I was feasting with my friends and the principal of the Galileans. This man, upon my servants telling me that a certain horseman of the Jewish nation was come, was called in at my command, but did not so much as salute me at all, but held out a letter and said, This letter is sent thee by those that are come from Jerusalem. Do thou write an answer to it quickly, for I am obliged to return to them very soon. Now my guest could not but wonder at the boldness of the soldier, but I desired him to sit down and sup with us. But when he refused to do so, I held the letter in my hands, as I perceived it, and fell a talking with my guests about other matters. But a few hours afterwards I got up, and when I had dismissed the rest to go to their beds, I bid only 4 of my intimate friends to stay, and ordered my servant to get some wine ready. I also opened the letter, so that nobody could perceive it, and understanding thereby presently the purport of the writing, I sealed it up again, and appeared as if I had not yet read it, but only held it in my hands. I ordered 20 drachmae should be given to the soldier for the charges of his journey, and when he took the money and said that he thanked me for it, I perceived that he loved money, and that he was to be caught chiefly by that means. And I said to him, If thou wilt but drink with us, thou shalt have a drachmae for every glass thou drinkest. So he gladly embraced this proposal and drank a great deal of wine in order to get more money, and was so drunk that at last he could not keep the secrets that he was entrusted with, but discovered them without my putting questions to him, viz. That a treacherous, is your guys say viz?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. That a treacherous design was contrived against me, and that I was doomed to die by those that sent him. When I heard this, I wrote back this answer. Josephus to Jonathan and those that are with him, sendeth greeting. Upon the information that you are come in health into Galilee, I rejoice, and this especially, because I can now resign the care of public affairs here into your hands, and return into my native country, which is what I had desired to do for a great while. And I confess I not only to come to you as far as Zeloth, but further, and this without your commands. But I desire you to excuse me, because I cannot do it now, since I watch the motions of Placidus, who hath a mind to go up to Galilee. And this I do here at Chabolo. Do you therefore on the receipt of this epistle come hither to me? Fare you well. When I had written thus, and given the letter to be carried by the soldier, I sent along with him 30 of the Galileans of the best characters, and gave them instructions to salute those ambassadors, but to say nothing else to them. I also gave orders to as many of those armed men, whom I esteemed most faithful to me, to go along with the others, every one of him whom he was to guard, lest some conversation might pass between those whom I sent and those who were with Jonathan. So those men went to Jonathan. But when Jonathan and his partners had failed in their first attempt, they sent me another letter, the contents whereof were as follows. Jonathan and those with him to Josephus send greeting. We require thee to come to us to the village of Gabaroth on the 3rd day without any armed men, that we might hear what thou hast to lay to the charge of John of Gischala. When they had written this letter, they saluted the Galileans whom I sent, and came to Jaffa, which was the largest village of all Galilee, and encompassed with very strong walls, and had a great number of inhabitants in it. There the multitude of men with their wives and children met them, and exclaimed loudly against them, and desired them to be gone, and not to envy them the advantage of an excellent commander. With these clamors, Jonathan and his partners were greatly provoked, although they durst not show their anger openly. So they made them no answer, but went to other villages. But still the same clamors met them from all the people, who said nobody should persuade them to have any other commander besides Josephus. So Jonathan and his partners went away from them without success, and came to Sepphoris, the greatest city of all Galilee. Now the men of the city, who inclined to the Romans in their sentiments, met them indeed, but neither praised nor reproached me. And when they were gone down from Sepphoris to Ashkochis, the people of that place made a clamor against them, as those of Jaffa had done. Whereupon they were able to contain themselves no longer, but ordered the armed men that were with them to beat those that made the clamor with their clubs. And when they came to Gabara, John met them with 3,000 armed men. But as I understood by their letter that they had resolved to fight against me, I arose from Chabolo with 3,000 armed men also, but left in my camp one of my fastest friends, and came to Jopata, as desirous to be near them, the distance being no more than 40 furlongs. Whence I wrote thus to them, if you are very desirous that I should come to you, you know there are 240 cities and villages in Galilee. I will come to any of them which you please, excepting Gabara and Gischala, the one of which John's native city, and the other in confederacy and friendship with him. All right, boys, what do we got? Does anyone get this so far? You guys figuring this out?
Yeah, Jonathan has risen up against him now.
Yep.
Another one of his friends have decided they're going to fight this guy.
Right.
He's like, let's not do this. So he has all his men ready. He's had them prepared. He's ready to go. He knew something like this was going to happen. And he basically left his friend there at the place. He left his fast friend, and then he said he's not going to, something, I don't know if it's for care for John, but he will not fight in John's native city.
Like John has like a bunch of power there.
Yeah, so this is really weird. This is definitely like Game of Thrones. Okay, 46. When Jonathan and his partners had received this letter, they wrote me no more answers, but called a council of their friends together. And taking John into their consultation, they took counsel together by what means they might attack me. John's opinion was that they should write to all the cities and villages that were in Galilee, for that there must be certainly one or two persons in every one of them that were at variance with me, and that they should be invited to come to oppose me as an enemy. He would also have them send this resolution of theirs to the city of Jerusalem, that its citizens, upon the knowledge of my being adjudged to be an enemy by the Galileans, might themselves also confirm that determination. He said also that when this was done, even those Galileans who were well affected to me would desert me out of fear. When John had given them this counsel, what he had said was very agreeable to the rest of them. I was also made acquainted with these affairs about the third hour of the night by the means of one Zacchaeus, who had belonged to them, but now deserted them and came over to me and told me what they were about. So I perceived that no time was to be lost. Accordingly, I gave command to Jacob, an armed man of my guard, whom I esteemed faithful to me, to take 200 men and to guard the passages that led from Gabara to Galilee, and to seize upon the passengers and send them to me, especially such as were caught with letters about them. I also sent to Jeremias himself, one of my friends, with 600 armed men to the borders of Galilee in order to watch the roads that led from this country to the city Jerusalem, and gave them charge to lay hold of such as traveled with letters about them, to keep the men in bonds upon the place, but to send me the letters. When I had laid these commands upon them, I gave them orders and bid them take their arms and bring 3 days' provisions with them and be with me the next day. I also parted those that were about me into 4 parts, and ordained those of them that were most faithful to me to be a guard to my body. I also sent over them centurions, and commanded them to take care that not a soldier which they did not know should mingle himself among them. Now on the 5th day following, when I was at Gabaroth, I found the entire plain that was before the village full of armed men who were come out of Galilee to assist me. Many others of the multitude also out of the village ran along with me. But as soon as I had taken my place and began to speak to them, they all made an acclamation and called me the benefactor and savior of the country. And when I had made them my acknowledgments and thanked them for their affection, I also advised them to fight with nobody, nor to spoil the country, but to pitch their tents in the plain and to be content with their substance they had brought with them. For I told them I had a mind to compose these troubles without shedding any blood. Now, this is what the translators say. Josephus' directions to his soldiers here are much the same that John the Baptist gave. Do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. Hence, whence Dr. Hudson confirms the conjecture that Josephus in some things was even now a follower of John the Baptist, which is no way improbable. So we don't know if any of that's true. These are guys' speculations. They're tossing this stuff in there. 245. Now it came to pass that on the very day, those who were sent by John with letters fell among the guards whom I had appointed to watch the roads. So the men were themselves kept upon the place as my orders were. But I got the letters, which were full of reproaches and lies, and I tended to fall upon these men without saying a word of matters to anybody. Now, as soon as Jonathan and his companions heard of my coming, they took all their own friends and John with them and retired to the house of Jesus, which indeed was a large castle and no way unlike a citadel. So they privately led a band of armed men therein and shut all the other doors but one, which they kept open. And they expected that I should come out of the road to them to salute them. And indeed, they had given orders to the armed men that when I came, they should let nobody besides me come in, but should exclude others, as supposing that by this means they should easily get me under their power. But they were deceived in their expectation, for I perceived what snare they had laid for me. Now, as soon as I got off my journey, I took up my lodgings over against them, or pretended to be asleep. So Jonathan and his party, thinking that I was really asleep and at rest, made and haste to go down into the plain to persuade the people that I was an ill governor. But the matter proved otherwise, for upon their appearance there was a cry made by the Galileans immediately, declaring their good opinion of me as their governor. And they made a clamor against Jonathan and his partners for coming to them when they had suffered no harm, and as though they would overturn their happy settlement, and desired them by all means to go back again, for that they would never be persuaded to have any other to rule over them but myself. When I heard this, I did not fear to go down into the midst of them. I went therefore myself down presently to hear what Jonathan and his companions said. As soon as I appeared, there was immediately an acclamation made to me by the whole multitude, and a cry in my commendation by them, who confessed their thanks was owing to me for my good government of them. All right, let's get through this story, and we'll call this one. When Jonathan and his companions heard this, they were in fear of their own lives and in danger lest they should be assaulted by the Galileans on my account. So they contrived how they might run away, but as they were not able to get off, for I desired them to stay, they looked down with concern at my words to them. I ordered, therefore, the multitude to restrain entirely their acclamations and place the most faithful of my armed men upon the avenues to be a guard to us, lest John should unexpectedly fall on us. And I encouraged the Galileans to take their weapons, lest they should be disturbed at their enemies, if any sudden insult should be made upon them. And then, in the final place, I put Jonathan and his partners in mind of their former letter, and after what manner they had written me, and declared they were sent by the common consent of the people of Jerusalem to make up the differences I had with John, and how they desired me to come to them. And as I spake thus, I publicly showed that letter they had written, till they could not at all deny what they had done. The letter itself convincing them. Convicting them. Yep, sorry, thank you. I then said, O Jonathan, and you that are sent with him as his colleagues, if I were to be judged as to my behavior compared with that of John's, and had brought no more than 2 or 3 witnesses, good men and true, it is plain you had been forced upon the examination of their characters beforehand to discharge the accusations. The translator's note says, we learned the practice of the Jews in the days of Josephus to inquire into the character of witnesses before they were admitted, and that the number ought to be 3 or 2 at the least, as exactly as the law of Moses. Okay, 257. All right, so we're starting right here. It is plain that you had been forced upon the examination of these characters beforehand to discharge the accusations, that therefore you may be informed that I have acted well in the affairs of Galilee. I think 3 witnesses too few to be brought by a man that had as ought to do. So I gave you all these witnesses. Okay, the translator says, this appealed to the whole body of the Galileans by Josephus, and the testimony they gave him of integrity in his conduct as their governor is very likely that appeal and testimony in the case of the prophet Samuel. Okay, I'm not sure what they're talking about there. Inquire of them how I have lived, and whether I have not behaved myself with all decency and after a virtuous manner among them. And I further conjure you, O Galileans, to hide no part of the truth, but to speak before these men as before judges, whether I have in anything acted otherwise than well. While I was thus speaking, the united voices of all the people joined together and called me their benefactor and savior, and attested to my former behavior, and exhorted me to continue so to do hereafter. And they all said upon their oaths that their wives had been preserved free from injuries, and that no one had ever been aggrieved by me. After this, I read to the Galileans 2 of these epistles, which had been sent by Jonathan and his colleagues, and which those whom I had appointed to guard the road had taken and sent to me. These were full of reproaches and of lies, as if I had acted more like a tyrant than a governor against them, with many other things besides therein contained, which were no better indeed than imprudent falsities. I also informed the multitude how I came by these letters, and that those who carried them delivered them up voluntarily, for I was not willing that my enemies should know anything of the guards I had set, lest they should be afraid of leave off writing hereafter. Did we ever get out of the story of Jonathan? Okay, let's go to the next one. I think 51 is the last one we'll do. When the multitude heard these things, they were greatly provoked at Jonathan and his colleagues that were with him, and were going to attack him and kill him. And this they had And this they had certainly done, unless I had restrained the anger of the Galileans and said that I forgave Jonathan and his colleagues what was past, if they would repent and go to their own country and tell those who sent them the truth as to my conduct. When I had said this, I let them go, although I knew they would do nothing of what they had promised. But the multitude were very much enraged against them, and entreated me to give them leave to punish them for their insolence. Yet did I try all methods to persuade them to spare the men, for I knew that every instance of sedition was pernicious to the public welfare. But the multitude was too angry with them to be dissuaded, and all of them went immediately to the house in which Jonathan and his colleagues abode. However, when I perceived that their rage could not be restrained, I got them horseback and ordered the multitude to follow me to the village Sogain, which was 20 furlongs off Gabara. And by using this stratagem, I so managed myself as not to appear to begin a civil war amongst them. All right, we'll leave it at this. Gentlemen, thoughts?
This dude stopped another war. His enemies are basically finished at this point. People are raged against them.
Why doesn't he go kill these people that are all left? Why didn't he just kill these people?
He keeps leaving them alive for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's like to show like he is merciful or something, or he's good. I don't know.
Well, what does he keep saying here? What is he trying not to do?
Like create a civil war.
He doesn't want a civil war.
Because John probably has a lot of followers from his area.
Yep. And so this is the story of Josephus. It's pretty wild. It's pretty dry. Definitely dry. I've definitely read better stories, no doubt. But it is what it is, and we need to take it. We need to sift out any kind of leaven that's there and read this. So hopefully to anyone of you guys that are out there, we love you. We hope you have a wonderful day. We're out.
All right. Shalom.